So thanks for coming out, to everybody, to hear more about it. Obviously, it's something I'm very excited about and passionate about, so always happy to share more information about it. So what I thought I'd do is, before jumping in very far at all, to just kind of set the stage and give you a bit of a feel for the event.
We'll build our company's rich heritage of leadership in solving the world's most pressing problems with fearless accountability. We commit to do these things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal is served to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we are willing to accept, one that we are unwilling to postpone, one which we intend to win.
The problems of our world can seem so complex, so vast, that they almost paralyze our souls. But for those with courage and vision, these challenges can inspire action on a scale that is equally unimaginable.
I just thought I would spend the hour first, spend a bit of time just chatting a bit about the water issue, because obviously that's why we did the run. That's why 20 of us spent 95 days running 24 hours a day around the world. And then I thought I would chat a bit more about the run itself. A lot of people are obviously interested in the run and the logistics and some of the stories and anecdotes from the run. We had these slides put together so that when we were on the run, if we were at schools or if we were at if we could get an audience anywhere at a local community center or church or wherever we could find space, and we had the ability to have a projector, we could walk through these slides and try and get the message across. So I'll try and go through it a little bit more quickly than we would if we were just talking about the water issue, because I also want to talk about the run. But the idea is, let's stop and think about water for a minute here. As many of you, I'm sure, know, 75% of the world is the surface of the Earth is covered in water. But unfortunately, only 97.5% of it is actually in the oceans and is not usable in terms of drinkable water, agriculture, or cleaning. So on top of that, of that 2.5%, well, there's 1.5% of the water in the world is actually tied up in ice, which leaves only 1% of all the water in the world for safe drinking water, or for fresh water. So that's obviously very little water that we have to support everybody on the planet. So when you take that in the context of the fact that 60% of the human body is made up of water, obviously it's something that we have. We all need, and it's an absolutely essential part of our life. The average person, just to cover their basic needs, would need about 50 liters of water per day, and that's just really covering some basic needs. Now, if somebody goes below 4 liters of water per day, then they really can't survive. So 4 liters is sort of the very bare minimum, and 50 liters is sort of covering basic needs.
Is that consumption?
That's use, per day in terms of, the bare bones would just be drinking. The 50 would be, some basic bathing or some basic washing. The 50 liters would not be consuming, but would be using fresh water, something that you can't use salt water for. So good question. And here are just some sort of, to put that in context for us in the West, some of the things that we do, obviously, showers and baths use a lot, but even just consuming food. So the hamburger in terms of, feeding the cattle and, the agriculture involved in creating the wheat that feeds the cows and so on. That's 700 liters of water just for a hamburger. So, when you look at it in that context, and then you look at the West versus folks in developing countries, and this is the average consumption per day in the West is about 400 liters versus about just under 34 liters per day in the developing world. So obviously, there's a huge portion of the world's population that have very little water, and worse than that, there are certain places in the world that are in even a more dire situation and actually don't have access to safe drinking water at all. And that number is pretty staggering. It's 1.2 billion people, so about a fifth of the world doesn't have access to safe drinking water. And you ask, well, what does that mean to have access to safe drinking water? It means that they can't every day get up and anywhere within a close vicinity of where they live get water that isn't going to either make them sick or so either they have water that's close by but it's going to make them sick, or they have to walk great distances to fetch the water, which means that they spend their time fetching water instead of going to school or doing things more productive. So water is really the sort of first rung on the way to improving the social situation in developing countries. Some other sort of basic facts. Because of all these people that do get sick because they opt to drink unsafe water that's nearby, 50% of all the hospital beds in the world are filled with people that drank unsafe drinking water. And that can be diarrhea, it can be malaria, it can be cholera. Diarrhea is unbelievably, one of the biggest causes of death for children in the developing world. So a big portion of the people that die every year because of unsafe drinking water are children, simply because they can't get the nutrients because they get some type of bug in an unsafe drinking water and they get diarrhea. That number is about 2.2 million people per year that die from lack of safe drinking water. And the photo is telling in that it's got a woman and a child, as children and women are really the ones most affected by it because they're the ones that inevitably are the ones that have to go fetch the water, and the children most susceptible to the problems that come from unsafe drinking water. Why is it unsafe? There's animal waste, there's human waste that ends up in the water, or there's sometimes arsenic that already exists in the water table wherever these people live. And they're just not able to, they don't have the systems to clean it. So the thing that attracted me to the water issue and what I got excited about was the fact that unlike a lot of other social issues that have some type of political bent or they don't have a technical solution available, people are working on a cure for HIV or a vaccine. The difference with the water issue is that the technological solutions are there. They are wells, or they could be rainwater harvesting systems. And so all of those technologies already exist. It's just a matter of getting them implemented, getting some resources behind them, and taking advantage of the water that actually exists in that area. For example, in a lot of these places, rain comes very quickly, very hard, and then it's gone. And a rainwater harvesting system that could be put on a school can catch the water, store it underneath the school, and all of a sudden the kids that before couldn't come to school or could spend much less time at school because they would spend, literally hours a day, 2 to 4 hours walking to the nearest source of clean water, they now have water in the school and they can actually learn and try and make their way up the social ladder. So these are the projects that we were helping to fund. Those are the types of things that we were raising money for. Obviously, we were also trying to raise awareness, but in the end, we were out there running because we wanted to get money to these projects to help people have safe drinking water. Blue Planet Run has already, over the last 3 or 4 years, implemented 135 water projects around the world. So they go in, and the local organizations, the NGOs that work in those areas that focus on water, submit a grant to the Blue Planet Run Foundation, and then money is given to those people that have good projects to work on, and then they, because they have the local knowledge, can implement those projects. The guy who had the idea to do the run's name is Jin Zidell. He had this idea, this vision to do this run around the world for safe drinking water, and basically is just a sort of everyday person that came up with the idea and just started making phone calls and working at it. And it's a true case of, it's an inspiring case because it's he just got the idea and started trying to figure out how to do it, and eventually got Dow to sponsor it a number of years after he first started working on it. And here's the route that was eventually selected. You'll notice we stayed to the north because for the first year we wanted to really keep it sort of safe and keep the logistics a little bit more simple. It was the first time they were doing it. The plan is to do it every other year, to have this run. And the connection between the running and the cause that I've just talked about is that the idea is that people have been messengers, runners have been messengers, forever. And the message that we have about safe drinking water is one that is so important that it'll be carried by hand all the way around the world and spread that way. And so that was the idea of the run. So it's 20 runners, 24 hours a day for 95 days. We passed 15,200 miles along the way through 16 different countries, and pretty much knew exactly where we were going to be at all times. We were on time throughout the entire event, and it's just an amazing logistical feat that I'll chat more about. So basically, the idea was to get a group of people together that cared about the water issue and raise awareness and money through the run. I'm going to skip through this. This is basically just how the water projects get funded from the Blue Planet Run Foundation. There's this Pure Water Exchange, which is a system for deciding which of the local NGOs are going to get water, and it's a system that allows the foundation to scale. Their goal is to provide 200 million people with safe drinking water by over the next 20 years. So in order to scale and to do that, they wanted to have a system in place that really made it easy to give the money to the different organizations. So obviously there are a lot of causes out there, and the idea is, well, why, how are you going to spend my money? And one of the great things with the Blue Planet Run Foundation is because of the corporate sponsorship by Dow, 100% of all the funds went straight to safe drinking water projects. And the math basically works out that $30 provides safe drinking water for one person for their entire life. So that's a pretty compelling number. $30 is water for life for one person. That was the message that we were trying to spread, because the nice thing is once a well is built, as long as the local community takes the time and the effort to maintain it, then that well can last for years and years and years without needing additional resources. Question is how we went from running to getting money for the cause. The way we did that was to drive people. The idea was to drive people to the website by getting them excited about the run, get them super excited about this feat that we were taking on, and get them to go to the website or donate on the spot. And there were a lot of different options for ways that they could feel like they were getting involved, either just giving a donation, or they could come and run with one of the runners for a leg. So when we got back to the United States, people that wanted to be a pace runner is what we call them. You could pay a sort of a minimum donation, $100, and come run with one of the runners and experience the Blue Planet Run, carry the baton, and so on. Basically, I found out about Blue Planet Run about 2 years before, about a year and a half, I should say, before it started. And I just kept, following it, thought it was, an amazing endeavor, and then applied to be one of the runners about 6 months before it started. There were about 200 or 300 people that put in their name, put in an application. Obviously, there were some constraints. You had to be able to leave your family, your friends, everything behind at home for 3 straight months. So that's not easy for a lot of different people. So, the pool was already shrunk, and those people that were the 200 to 300 put in the application were ones that had already decided that that was possible. Then they chose people from that through an interview process. They wanted to get people that could spread the message, obviously, but they also wanted to have an international and diverse group. So they got people, the team was comprised of people from 13 different countries. So it was a very international group. And by the time we got selected in April, it was only a couple months before the event started. So for me, that meant having to make sure that I got all my classes done here at the GSB before having to leave on sort of May 25th. So I had to kind of leave about a week and a half early. Knew I was going to miss graduation, but I just wanted to do have the experience. So I did whatever I could, talk to professors and made the arrangements so that I could do it. And then we basically started in New York. We started at the UN building. You saw Hilary Swank there. She was one of the spokespeople for the event. We kicked it off with a little ceremony there outside the UN building, had a couple of speakers from Dow, the UN, and JIN, and off we went. And it was a pretty incredible feeling to be standing there and know that 95 days later we were going to have traveled all that distance by foot. So the way it worked was the team of 20, and this is something that I think a lot of people, when you first look at the site, you don't get a sense of, and I alluded to it, or when people ask me about it and how hard it was, I always sort of talk about the logistics and how that was the more difficult part than the running. And that's because of the team of 20, we were subdivided into 5 teams of 4. And with those 4 of us, we basically spent all of our time together. So we were running, getting in the van, going to our next hotel. And so each one of those 4 runners, I would basically run my 10 miles. The next person would run their 10 miles in our sub-team, and then the next, and then the next. And then we would all get in the van, go to our next hotel, eat, sleep, get a massage if we could, rest, and then get back up on the road and drive. So as you can imagine, this thing is moving 180 miles per day we're covering. And so everyone, even if you're not running, you have to be keeping up with this machine that is moving along at 180 miles a day. So that means a lot of time with those same 4 people, means a lot of time in a vehicle. Spent probably, I would say, on average, 8 to 10 hours per day in a vehicle for 95 straight days. Slept in 95 different hotel rooms over the course of 95 days. Ate at, just every imaginable type of restaurant, roadside cafe that you can think of. And really got sleep deprived, obviously. So the way it worked was that those sub-teams of 4, we would do 4 days on with our 10 miles and then have 1 day off, and then we would switch to the next running time. So there were 4 different running times, either 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., 9 p.m. to 3 a.m., 3 a.m. to 9 a.m. So 2 daytime shifts and 2 nighttime shifts. And so if our team was on 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., we'd do that for 4 days. Then we would have our day off, and then we would go into the 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. And I'll tell you, the night shifts, it was night and day between those shifts. It was, when you were on the night shift, you did not sleep very well. You did not eat very well because it's very difficult to find. We were sort of on our own for food. We had, a stipend, but we sort of as a team with there was a staff member who was the driver in places where they spoke English or we could get along without an interpreter. We had just one driver, and in those countries where we needed an interpreter, we would have an interpreter and a driver, and we would have to sort of find our way to whatever food was nearby and get that. So when you combine all of those things, the running is actually you're already at a much different level of ability to handle stress, both physical and mental, and then to put it, that's why the running became difficult. So the running per se in itself, it's only 56 miles a week average, which is, it's a lot, but it's not, for people who run a decent amount, that's not a crazy amount of mileage. But it's when you combine that with all the other logistics that it becomes difficult. So what I thought I'd do is just show, as we went along, we had a videographer and a photographer that followed along, and they would send up video updates back to the website so that people following back home could take a look at it. And there's a 5-minute video here from Russia. There were 3 that were in Russia because Russia was obviously a long portion of our trip. It was about a month, and you'll see this is getting near the end of Russia, and it was long.
Russia's been great, and sometimes awesome, sometimes hard, and it's a surprise every day. You don't know if you're going to have a nice place to stay or a nice food. Sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's great, and it's been long. It's a long time in Russia.
So we're in Russia, and we've been traveling for about 2.5 weeks now, and the days have gotten a bit long. Every day seems the same. The road has been flat and fairly monotonous.
It's a gorgeous country. I think I've been running past the same potato field though for the past 4 days. And honestly, no one told me that the horseflies were the size of actual horses.
I'm coming past these little cottages, just a beautifully coloured here in Siberia with greens and vibrant blues, and it just makes the run so much more interesting. So I've got a good section today. Ready? So we're going to take my house when I get back to New Zealand. This colour.
Russia has been really exciting in different spots, and in other spots it's been a little boring, running beside fields for 4 days. We call them in South Carolina deer flies, but they call them horse flies here. Same thing, so big that I could have caught a ride with one and gotten down the road a lot faster.
Today the whole 40 miles, we had all different kinds of bugs. One had taken photograph with like 2 inches, We had like 20 of them in our van.
Trying to dispose of the enemy.
Get him, you got him, oh!
Well, today we got less heat, but these little biting bugs, not the big deer flies, little small things, and I went by a creek, and then they came out of the woodworks and ingested them. The last, 5 miles, it came in my back, I guess, like I've been hit with a bunch of darts.
Watch out, you'll get spotted!
So here in Russia, not only are we running and battling the bugs, but we've also had some fun time dancing. We put on some of our own music every once in a while, but also with our drivers and interpreters, we rock it to a little bit of Russian music, whether it be on the side of the road or nighttime establishments as well.
Well, we're bored, and we're waiting for the exchanges. We'd love to kind of have dance parties on the side of the road, sometimes to welcome in the runners.
This is Russia. This is Omsk in Russia. Oh, everything is wonderful. Great. English. Yeah.
Very good.
Yes.
Photo.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Probably because of my country, because I come from Africa. Like today, everybody was saying this was the first part. I was the first person to be seen in this country. Everybody, oh, let me take a photo with you. Oh, let me, please, kindly, And I was like, coming from Kenya to Russia is like, imagine from 0 to hero. And I'm like, king in Russia. As I told you, from 0 to hero, you can see for yourself.
quality of the water through Russia here has varied quite a bit from place to place. There were definitely some hotels where you didn't even have to turn on the taps, you didn't even have to put on the shower to know that the water was not going to be good. You could walk in and you could just smell it, and then you turn on the tap and it would be sort of, you know, milky or a little bit brown and really smelly. I mean, there are a lot of people in Russia that are going to fetch water from the wells, and then after that, it's like learning a new word. You see it all the time after. After that, we start to see more and more people along the way in the villages actually going to fetch water, you know, without access to safe water even in their house, you know, even here in Russia. And that was something that we didn't really expect along the way.
Day 48 of the prepare run since we started the run in New York. Now we are in Russia in Lake Baikal, which is one of the deepest lakes and the largest in the world.
Lake Baikal, 1/5 of the world's fresh water is in this lake. It's just this symbolic day that we get here. We, you know, start the United Nations, the symbol of unity in the world, to the deepest and biggest lake, fresh water. So it's really interesting just to come here. We are all across Russia, the biggest country in the world, and here we are looking at the water. And look at our cause. We're trying to promote safe drinking water in the world, and this is a huge lake full of safe drinking water. It's just amazing to be here.
And we've been in Russia for gosh, I guess 3 weeks. However, the country is exquisitely beautiful. Every run has been different. Every day has been different. And I've really come to appreciate just how small I am in this vast, vast country.
Water's life. That's it all.
A lot of people sort of ask, like, you know, what were the highlights, top moments, the best moments, the worst moments. One of the best moments for me personally was coming into Lake Baikal, which is the largest freshwater lake in the world. It contains about 1/5 of all the world's fresh water in that one lake. And it was at the farthest end of Siberia for us, the furthest east. And then we were going to go into Mongolia. And for us on the run, as you can imagine, you get 2 or 3 weeks in on that same main highway that runs through Siberia with all the trucks going by, and day after day, the same type of view. I mean, we were looking at Lake Baikal. I was like, wow, it's finally, you know, then we're heading to Mongolia. And so the morning that we were to run next to Baikal, for my team, we were running 3 a.m. to 9 a.m., so it was actually the night shift. But the sun was coming up at around 4:30, and I was running that shift when the sun came up. So it was dark, you know, went out, and then the sun started to rise, and I came up and I could see the lake, and, you know, ran down to the lake with the sunrise coming up. And after all that time to be able to see it, you know, you just can't explain how long something, you know, how much you're anticipating that moment. I finished the run, and we went down to the lake, sort of put our feet in, walked down, and ran into some fishermen who were down there. Did not speak, obviously, you know, any bit of English. So we did the usual charades and tried to get our points across. And, you know, we didn't really communicate that much. But then these guys they had these big bins of fish that are only found in Lake Baikal called omel. And they, you know, took these Ziplocs and gave us, you know, these fish to take with us. So they said, yeah, take the fish. So we took the fish. We had no idea what we were going to do with them. We were going to cook them in the van, you know, get some lighters. But we were like, yeah, that's really nice. And then they were trying to get their boat out of the water and to put it into their truck. So, you know, before we left, they're like, okay, now it's your turn to help us. So we went into the water, grabbed this boat, and there were 3 fishermen, there were 2 of us runners, and we hauled the boat and put it in the back of the truck. And for me, it was just, you know, such a great day to, you know, that's part of travel. That's part of being in these different places, to feel like you're having some interaction with the locals. And I should explain also that my wife was I haven't mentioned this before, my wife was on the event as well. We were the only couple selected. Of all the 20 runners, you know, we were the only married couple. And so that was a big advantage for us in that, you know, we had somebody else at the end of the day to talk to. Because a lot of times, I mean, there was no cell coverage, no internet. I mean, you just, at the end of the day, you had your teammates. And for us, it was very nice to have that. On the other side of the coin, it was also a responsibility for us, because we felt we didn't want to impact the dynamic of the group by being a couple. So that was, you know, something we always had to be aware of. And being around other people all the time, you're not acting the way you normally would necessarily with your spouse. And so that was, you know, a tough balance for us. But I mean, obviously for me that was one of the big highlights was to be able to spend that time with my wife. Lake Baikal was one of the highlight moments. On the tougher moments, I would say would be in China. Was one of the hardest times that we had. A lot of people got sick, as I mentioned, from food poisoning, and our team happened to not be very sick. And we were set to run 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. Or sorry, from 3 p.m. From 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. But because of the logistics, they had to swap us out and put us from 9 p.m. that day to 3 a.m. and then to run the next day at 3 p.m. So instead of having the usual 3-cycle break, we were only going to have 12 hours off between, which already, as soon as you start cutting into that rest, it makes it very difficult. And then on top of it, we ran into one of the teams in the hotel lobby, the team that was going to run before us, and they said, listen, we're sick and we're injured. And so we said, well, we'll take 10 miles. We offered to take 20 miles from their team from that leg. And they said, no, just do 10. We showed up, and they barely made it through their 30 miles. I mean, a guy who's a very tough Scottish guy that was on the team, he was sick, very sick and running. And we got to the end, and he was sort of struggling to get up. But we started that run 7:30 p.m. We ran until 3 a.m. And then we desperately wanted to get to our hotel in Beijing so that we could have a bit of rest before having to start running again at 3 p.m. the next day. Well, we finished the run, and we got into our car, and we were driving toward Beijing when all of a sudden our driver accidentally pulled into the truck way station lane instead of the main highway where if you're not a truck, you don't have to go in this way station lane. Before we knew it, we were in this line of trucks as far as the eye could see forward, and they started piling up behind us, and we're stopped. I mean, dead stop. It's now 4:30 in the morning. We know we have to run the next day at 3. And our driver literally puts his seat back, puts his feet up on the steering wheel to go to sleep. And we were like, no, this is, we're jammed. We had 2 other people that we were also taking to the airport that were sort of a part of the event, but not runners, and they had to be there by sort of 8 in the morning. And we said, no, we have to figure this out. So our interpreter, bless her heart, did everything she could. I mean, we were out on the street, basically did a 10-point turn to try and go back out the way we came out of this way station lane. And our interpreter is getting these truck drivers to try and move on the side of the road. I mean, they're all there just smoking and hanging out because they know that they're going to be stuck for a long time, and then they're going to drive, 200 meters, and then it's going to be stuck again. Well, we started making our way back, and eventually one belligerent truck driver would not move. And so that whole plan, after spending all that time trying to go backwards, couldn't do it. So we basically had to turn around and just wait. And we would drive, every 15 minutes or so, everybody would start their engines. We would drive. We'd go, a few hundred meters and then stop. Same thing. Everybody's out smoking and chatting. And we did that. So it took us about 2 hours to get through the way station lane. We got into Beijing at about 6 in the morning, checked into our hotel at 7, had a quick shower, ate some breakfast, went back to sleep for about 2 or 3 hours. And until we ate breakfast, we hadn't eaten since 4 in the afternoon, other than, if you've ever been to China, the crazy snacks that you had a lot of meat products or whatever you can find, So we were just starving by the time we got to the hotel, ate breakfast, slept a couple hours, and then it was after all that time, we wanted to see the Great Wall of China. So that was, our next leg was going to be from the Great Wall running into the center of Beijing. So even though we were exhausted, we said, well, let's leave at 11 a.m. It's going to take us 2 hours to cover the 70K just because the traffic is so terrible in Beijing, but it'll be worth it. We can see the Great Wall. So we head out to the Great Wall. We're driving out there. Sure enough, we hit a traffic jam. And we've got the GPS on our lap. We're looking at where we're going. And, I see the sort of the spot where I think we're supposed to start our run, but it can't be on the main highway that we're on, so it's probably on a road underneath. But our interpreter said she knows this area. She's like, trust me, I know this area. We'll get there. So we pass, against all my best judgment. I didn't say anything, just sat there. Eventually, we turn off of the main road, and we spend about 45 minutes doing this big loop. And I can see where it's going because on the GPS, I can follow where our vehicle's gone. And then all of a sudden, we're back at the same spot on the same road, going the same direction as we were 2 hours before that. And so I said to our interpreter, I said, Victoria, we're at the same spot, going the same direction as we were 2 hours ago. And she looks back at me and she goes, yes, I know, Sean, I lied before. we made a mistake and missed the turn. And I was like, oh my God, you've got to be kidding me. So we showed up 45 minutes late. We'd left, it took us 4 and a bit hours to cover the 70 kilometers to get to the start. Ran into Beijing and the pollution. And so by the end of that leg, I mean, we were all just so spent. And that's where the logistics, again, were much more difficult than the actual running. And that's just, not to say, I mean, that's part of the adventures of travel, but at the time, you're not really thinking that's the adventures of travel. You're thinking this is a really bad idea. So those are a couple quick anecdotes. I mean, just to summarize, my thoughts on it, it was an amazing experience. The cause, I think, is extremely important. Obviously, there are a ton of causes out there. For me, as sort of, a business school student, do I think it's, everybody, you ask yourself, should I give money? Should I give my time? How should I help? A lot of people want to help. And I just think getting out there and doing something and being out every day and not thinking about yourself, coming from the MBA program where every day you get up and all you're thinking about is yourself, how are you going to better yourself, which is my best networking opportunity, how am I going to, eke the most value out of this discussion. You go there and, I mean, that's maybe a little bit cynical, but you know what I mean. It's a very egocentric situation, and to go and do this run felt good to not be thinking about yourself or thinking about business situations. So for me, I really enjoyed that. And again, I don't want to sound cynical about business school. I mean, it's a great experience, but this was just totally different and something that I recommend people get involved and try something out.
Global relay, running around the world, literally. An extreme athletic event with an urgent message.
From ABC News headquarters in New York, this is World News.
And the very long-distance runners in a race to save the world. And finally from us tonight, the race to save the planet in words and in action. In Italy today, Pope Benedict told a crowd of 500,000 young people that they need to take better care of the earth, especially the fragile water supply. 1 in 5 people around the world lacks access to clean water. Turns out that for the past 3 months, some amazingly determined runners have been carrying that very message on foot, mile by mile, around the world. ABC's Mike Saray has been tracking them.
Mary Sherbanak's excellent summer adventure started just before Memorial Day at the United Nations.
I had so much adrenaline pumping through my system, my legs were shaking.
She and 20 other runners from 13 countries put their jobs and families on hold to run around the world, 15,000 miles, to raise awareness and money for the global water crisis. What keeps you going?
All those people that die every day.
Lack of clean water kills more people around the world than AIDS. Nearly 2 million children die each year from diarrhea alone. From New York, the runners headed to Boston, then through Ireland, Britain, France, Belgium, and the Netherlands, each running 10 miles a day.
Beautiful day, though, isn't it?
60-year-old Lansing Brewer is an ultramarathoner, but he never imagined how grueling running a 24/7 relay would be. Just 2 more continents to go. On the 4th of July, they crossed from Europe into Asia.
I need a ride!
By now, they were definitely feeling the effects of the constant running.
I tripped, and I fell flat on my face.
Well, if it's Wednesday, it must be Lake Baikal in Siberia. That's where we are, the largest source of fresh water on the planet. 20% of all the fresh water on Earth is right out here in this lake. It was a revelation to Emmanuel Kibet, a professional marathoner from Kenya, who grew up in a family of 9 without access to clean water. About halfway through the journey, they next faced the barren high desert of Mongolia. They run day and night, battling the traffic through major cities, the desolation of desert crossings, and the effects of bad food and water, which sidelined a quarter of the team in China. But it wasn't all hardship.
Very happy news.
Japan's Taiko Taruchi and Canada's Jason Lutet started dating in France, got engaged in Russia, and married while running past Niagara Falls. A truly long-distance love affair.
Bye-bye.
Bye. The runners are now in the home stretch. They've made it across the United States. Their excellent and very tiring adventure ends Tuesday, back where they started, in New York. This is Mike Saray for ABC News.